All right, everybody. For this video, we are introducing our next unit, which is the financial sector. And this is sort of where we cover a lot more about banking. And to cover that, we really have to understand some of the basis of it, which has to do with savings and investment and matching up those ideas when it comes to sort of human behavior. So, first, when we think about this, we have to realize that physical capital, so factories, large machinery, the things that we've talked about when we've talked about capital spending, usually has to be paid for through borrowing. So we kind of need this stuff, and it stimulates economic growth. So we need to borrow so we can invest in our economy through capital goods, and that stimulates long run economic growth as we have better technology, as we invest in these capital goods. So, as we consider that idea that this is a necessary function within our economy, we have to really now create an identity which is the savings, investment, spending identity. And at first, to do this, we assume a simple economy. So, no government, no international trade, just a basic market here. And when we do that, we can consider the idea that your total income has to equal your total spending. So the amount that people spend has to be, by definition, given to somebody eventually in income. If we break income up, we see that when you have income, your two choices of what to do with that are spend or save. So consumption or savings. On the spending side of things, you either spend your money on consumption or investment spending. So we now have these two things, the idea that income is consumption and savings, and spending is consumption and investment. So if we use those two ideas as both sides of our original equation, we come up with consumption plus savings, which is equal to total income, equals consumption plus investment, which is equal to total spending. So if you then simplify that, because consumption's on both sides, then you end up with the savings investment identity. Savings is equal to investment by definition. Now, of course, this becomes a little bit more complicated as we add in government. You add in government, the public sector, to this private sector, and you get the idea that government can spend or save money as well. And our budget balance, or BB, is equal to our tax revenue minus government spending minus transfers. So in other words, the money that the government is getting in through tax revenue minus what it's spending, which is government spending and transfer payments. If budget balance is greater than zero, it means that the government is running a surplus. That means it's saving money. If the budget balance is less than zero, it means the government's running a deficit. It is borrowing money because it's spending more than it's taking in. So now if we include this in here, we now consider total national savings investment is equal to savings plus budget balance. So investment equals savings plus the budget balance. So private sector savings plus the budget balance. But let's complicate it a little bit further, because now we have to add in the international sector. So when we have foreign people, we realize foreign people can save in any country. You can save your money and invest in any country around the world. As you have inflow, that means foreign people are saving money in U.S. firms. There is an inflow. There is finance into U.S. Capital. Outflow is when we are saving things in foreign countries. So your total general inflow is your capital inflow is equal to your total inflow minus your total outflow, which makes sense. It's sort of the same idea as imports and exports, but for investment savings. And these are in terms of like bonds issued, because you buy a bond for a foreign company, and then they would then use that to finance their capital improvements. So that would be outflow to our country, what I just described. So if we now add that into our identity, investment is equal to private sector savings plus government sector savings, which is the budget balance, plus capital inflow, which is savings in our economy minus savings in other economies, represented by CI. So that is our savings, investment, spending identity in total. You have to consider all of those things when we're considering our financial markets. And our financial markets are really where our households invest our current savings by purchasing these financial assets. So now we're getting into assets that are not physical in nature. So not a factory, not new machinery, but now other things. Now we can get into stocks and bonds, and well, not stocks so much, but bonds and things like that. This entitles the buyer to a future income from the seller, which makes sense. When you have a bond, you're lending money to whoever sold you that bond, and they are then eventually going to pay you back with interest. So the three tasks of the financial system, which is sort of connecting these parties, is to reduce transaction costs and make things easier to do, because it's fairly difficult to go out and find individuals if you don't have any connections to invest in your business. That is difficult to do. It's difficult for me to go out on the street and say, I want to sell bonds for my business. I don't know anybody. But if I approach a bank and say, hey, I need a loan, can you do this? The bank will then look at me, rate my business, and try to find buyers for my bonds. This also can reduce risk. Uncertainty about outcomes in terms of financial losses and gains is something that the financial system is going to be looking at. They're trying to reduce this amount of uncertainty by giving an air of respectability and oversight to it. So this is designed to reduce that. It also reduces risk in diversification. So with a lot of these financial instruments, you're able to invest in many assets at once. So if one asset doesn't necessarily work out, you don't lose all of your money. You only lose a portion of it. So that's a diversification. You put your money in a lot of different places. And the third task of the financial system is to provide liquidity. So when you give your money to somebody and turn it into an asset, you are going to eventually want your asset to turn into cash, or you want convertibility eventually of your asset into cash. Because say there's some sort of downturn in your luck, you need quick cash, you want a way to get your money back. So that is the third task of the financial system. Now, what are these financial assets that the financial system is selling you? First and foremost, loans. That's going to be sort of the easiest one. So a financial asset is a loan because you think of it in terms of buying the loan, not the person who has money loaned to them. It's a liability for them because they have to pay the loan back. But their whole business is set up where people can invest in other people's loans. So this happens all the time, and especially when we talk about the financial crash of 2008. People were giving out loans to people to buy houses and things of that nature, and then banks were taking those loans and selling them to investors, so that the profits on those loans were going to the investors and not directly to the bank. So that's the idea of loans. Bonds, same sort of idea, only this is generally from a government or a business. The seller is going to essentially be selling a bond that entitles the owner to a fixed sum of interest and payable on certain times, and to repay the principal at a eventual date. So the bond will mature, 30 years in the future, and the principal, the original amount of the bond, will be paid then. But before then, there's going to be fixed sums of interest being paid, or it can be all collected at the end if you want. Loan-backed securities, these are going to be sort of collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. This is essentially a financial creation where they lump together a bunch of different individual loans. So this is, again, something that happened in the financial crash of 2008. They bundled together a bunch of mortgages, and they started selling shares in that pool. So that way, if one mortgage didn't get paid out, the rest were there to sort of cover the losses. That's a process called securitization, linking this all together and selling it out in pools. And the last type of financial asset we won't talk about too much is stocks, and that's just partial ownership in a company. So that entitles you to a certain amount of the profits in that company at given intervals. The people who carry this stuff out are known as financial intermediaries. Um, these are essentially those institutions that take funds, take the savings, and turn them into financial assets. So taking savings from certain people and uh, selling them these different funds in different ways. So these can be mutual funds. This is where you get a stock portfolio, buying into shares of different companies, and then selling shares of that total portfolio. So you individually don't own a stock; you own part of a portfolio that owns stock. So once again, diversification uh, of risk, and at the same time, individuals don't have to actually look over it too closely. Pension funds, same sort of idea, but safer. It's a way of people um, collectively coming together, investing those funds in a variety of assets, and that is specifically to provide retirement income. So pension funds have to only um, only invest in very, very safe things. Life insurance companies are also considered financial intermediaries as they buy and sell life insurance, which darkly enough actually is an asset because it's a bet on how long you're going to live. Once again, as darkly as that can turn out, that is something that you can exchange, you can buy yourself out of, you can sell your life insurance policy. And banks, of course, are probably the one that you're most familiar with, as banks give out loans for mortgages and things like that, and then turn around and sell those loans to investors or other companies or other banks. And that is it for the basic intro. So once again, these are institutions that are lining up our financial assets that turn savings into investment, and that's the whole point of the financial markets. So we're going to be going a lot more in depth to how these intermediaries do this and what effects that has on the money supply and the market for money and the market for loanable funds as well. Thanks.